Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for Friday Reads, and it is a kind of a catch-up one because I was out of town last week, so I have some extra books to go through. If you are new to the channel, welcome. I noticed a number of new subscribers coming in over the past week, so I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope you enjoy today's video. So first of all, as always, with television, we are rewatching Schitt's Creek. I think I mentioned it last time, and it is so good again. It is so funny. There's lots of little tiny lines that you would almost miss that I think I'm picking up the second time through. They're just absolutely hilarious. But there's things that are both in the same episode that you forgot about, and then when you were watching and it comes through different favorite parts, it's just kind of a nice surprise. And we did pass through Fold in the Cheese this week, so that's one of my favorite scenes. The other thing we've been watching this week is a British show called Criminal Record, and I don't know how many episodes are in it, but it's pretty good. It's about there's a police investigator. It's a police procedural. There is a woman named Jude who's a police investigator, and she starts to look into a case. There's a phone call that comes in to a domestic abuse helpline 911 kind of phone center, and it is this woman is very frantic, and she's in a phone booth and she's talking about a boyfriend, and in the conversation she mentions that her boyfriend has been bragging that he's responsible for this murder from 10 years ago that someone else is in prison for. And then some other things happen, but so June is trying to find out if there's any credibility to this claim, and she encounters some interesting roadblocks to looking into this. Steve and I talked about how you could make a bingo for police procedurals, and it would apply to books or movies and TV shows, and there's just certain tropes that are going to happen, and they don't really ruin the story, but they're just always there, like institutional resistance, like don't go there, and having different kind of being reassigned or some kind of obstacle put in your path. There's you need to go home and get some sleep. There's running into situations that are very hazardous without waiting for the backup. There's arguments at home with your partner about the intensity of your job, suspicious people on the force. So all these are in play, but it's really been pretty good and not entirely predictable or anything like that. So we're kind of hooked into it right now, and we are enjoying that. So that's Criminal Record. So let's move on to the books, because there's quite a few since I didn't talk last week about these. So I was kind of at the end of The Good Lord Bird, I think, the last time we checked in, and I did finish it. This was great. I really love James McBride. I have read 3 of his novels, and I really would like to read his memoir, The Color of Water. My library, I guess, had it, and it got damaged, because that's what it says in their catalog. So I might check, see if I can get a secondhand copy, because I would like to read that. This one is a historical fiction, and it is about a young boy who ends up with the nickname Onion, who is posing as a girl and traveling with the abolitionist John Brown in the times preceding and during the raid at Harper's Ferry. Onion accidentally becomes a boy in disguise because John Brown mistakes him for a girl when he meets him, and then he finds out that it's advantageous in several ways for everybody to think he's a girl. So he goes along with the masquerade, but he's narrating the story from a later point in his life. It is both funny and compelling and hits on the historical events from a really fresh point of view. And John Brown seems almost like a tall tale figure in the story, but pretty much the way he's presented is the way he is described in historical, studies. And some of the funniest bits are when they are right in the middle of being pursued, or there's some kind of battle breaking out, and John Brown thinks that's the greatest time to start a big sermon, and he'll just stand there, or they're getting ready to eat, and then he makes a prayer that goes on for 30 minutes, and everybody's sad because the food got cold. Um, and as they get closer to Harper's Ferry, more and more people realize that his plan is just bonkers and a suicide mission. And his expectations that hundreds or thousands of enslaved people are going to rise up and join in the revolt sadly does not come to pass. These are not spoilers. This is just what happened in history. But the way that the story is told from Onion's point of view is what makes the novel so wonderful. My favorite scene is the scene at Frederick Douglass's house where Onion contemplates the unusual domestic situation where Frederick Douglass seems to have two wives, and the scene in which they kind of try to outdrink each other. And anyway, very interesting, funny scene. And other figures from history appear in here. Harriet Tubman, her reputation remains intact, but Frederick Douglass gets skewered pretty hard. So I enjoyed this book very much. A book that I read mostly on my trip and finished up right when I got home was One Good Turn by Kate Atkinson. This is the second Jackson Brodie novel. If you're new, I am reading my way back through is there five Jackson Brodie novels and a sixth one coming out later this year. And I had already decided to reread them, and then I found out a new one was coming, so all the better. And this was the second one, as I said. And once again, she creates an intricate plot and uses multiple characters. You have to stay on your mental toes when you're reading one of her books, or you will get lost or confused or forget who somebody is. This is how I picture it in my mind, how she structures many of her books, this one for sure. She starts out, she introduces a bunch of characters. Some of them might be familiar to you from previous books and some are new. And they might be a little bit related from a central incident. In this case, the scene opens with a fender bender in traffic during a busy cultural festival in Edinburgh. And so there's all these people. Each person's plot or personal storyline starts to spin. So picture all these little spinning discs. And then a web starts to form in between the people. And then the entire connected discs set starts going along together to form the overall plot. So it's kind of like a solar system. That was a terrible explanation, but that's what it's like. And we have some of the people involved here besides Jackson Brodie, his girlfriend, the actor Julia, Louise, who is a police officer who's introduced in this book, but she's going to reappear in other books. And she is struggling with a teenage son. And some of the descriptions of Louise trying to figure out Archie. Archie is also one of the characters that's introduced at the scene of the fender bender, he's on a little shoplifting spree with his very Eddie Haskell-ish friend Hamish. And we also have Martin, who is a writer of cozy mysteries, but aspires to other types of literature. He aspires to a lot of things, but he basically just lives in his head in a fantasy world where that also kind of sounds like a cozy story, kind of a post-war imaginary bucolic existence with a fantasy wife. And he gets overlooked and underestimated in real life all the time. Who else do we have? Oh, Gloria, who is the wife of a shady real estate developer who she realizes that he's about to go down financially for fraud, and she's been squirreling away money. And at the very beginning, she receives word that her husband had a heart attack while in bed with a sex worker. And so all of these and a number of other people come into play, and they touch, they separate, they intersect, and then we have to get to the end to find out how it all fits together. So it was very entertaining, once again, and she can really nail some really perfect sentences, and I might have to share one or two. All right, so this is on the topic of Louise puzzling over her rather alien 14-year-old son. She's giving him some breakfast and he's completely monosyllabic. She put Weetabix in a bowl, poured milk on it, gave him a spoon. Eat. she said. A dog would be more capable. Being 14 meant he had slipped back down the evolutionary ladder to some pre-social rung. Some men of Louise's acquaintance had never climbed back up again. Okay, one other little piece I'm going to share. This is the description of a hotel room that the writer is staying in because something happened at his house, so he has to stay at a hotel. But, and it has these rather lurid and violent paintings on the wall. Martin was in a different room at the Four Clans. He was lying on the bed trying to have a nap. His body was exhausted, but his brain had apparently discovered a secret amphetamine factory and was popping pills at will. This happens to me all the time. Body's dead, brain on fire. All right, so the picture on the wall opposite his bed was a print of Burke and Hare caught in the act of gleefully digging up a dead body, almost, but not quite, trumping the flaming witch of the previous room. He sat up and twisted round in order to see what was hanging over the bed. The battle of Flodden Field, the slaughter of the Scots in full swing. 24 hours ago, he didn't even know that the Four Clans existed, and now his entire life seemed contained within its tartan walls. He was being brainwashed by plaid. So, as you can tell, I had an excellent time rereading One Good Turn by Kate Atkinson. And I'm on to her next book in March. I also read The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. This was a buddy read with Michael Clark, and the timing also coincided with a book that was perfect for Black History Month. It's a middle grade novel that Curtis won a Newbery honor medal, which is like the silver, like when they do the Newbery medal, one book wins, and then they can have as many honor books as they wish. They can have none, they can have 3, they can do whatever. And so this it would be 1996. The book came out in 95, so it got that honor in 96. And it is a story set, as it says, in 1963, about a Black family that lives in Flint, Michigan, where Curtis sets many of his stories. And what was interesting was neither of us really were aware, even though I was rereading it, that so much of the book takes place before the trip to Birmingham. So this family of 5, and it's narrated by Kenny, a 10-year-old boy. And the older brother, who is 13, Byron, has started to get into a lot of trouble. And so the parents decide that they're going to take a road trip to Birmingham, Alabama, and leave him with the Southern grandmother. And she's going to set him straight. And maybe he's going to stay there for the summer. Maybe he's going to stay there for the school year. So, but before we get to that, we have wonderful texture of the early 60s and this family in Michigan. The extremity of how cold it was there. Kenny's life as a middle child, his caretaking of his younger sister and trying to sidestep and yet be kind of impressed by his juvenile delinquent, as they call him in the story, older brother. He is right there on the edge of getting into some kind of serious trouble, and that's what the parents are trying to stave off. And anyway, it's funny. I mean, there's wonderful things. Like, I've had Yakety Yak stuck in my head for days and days because that's Kenny's favorite song and he plays it all the time. And the dad gets one of those car record players for the trip, and they sit in the car for hours before they even take the trip, just enjoying the records. And we talked about all these things and more, and it was a very good reading experience and discussion. Before I left, I started a couple of short stories when I had a little piece of leftover time, and I actually did finish the Martian Chronicles last night, even though this was part of my March TBR. I kind of jumped the gun. I got caught up in it because it was really good. They are connected stories. I did not understand this going into it, and the stories were written, I think, starting in the 40s, like maybe from the 40s through the 60s. They were written over a period of time, but they hang together. Earth is kind of messed up. They've used up a lot of the resources. Things are getting pretty trashed. And so they start a series of expeditions to see if they can start also using Mars and colonize Mars. Mars has people living there already. I don't think they're interested in being colonized. Does this sound familiar? And all the people in the story that are wanting to move to Mars and start an alternative to living on Earth are all Americans. And so I don't know what everyone else in the world was doing, but this is what Americans were doing, trying to move to Mars. And the stories are presented in sequence, starting with the first expedition and how that turned out and moving up in time. I was surprised. I don't want to talk too much about it because this is for a reading event that's in March, and I don't want to jump ahead of that discussion. But I was happily surprised. I was surprised. I haven't read a lot of Ray Bradbury, and I've gotten interested in him through some short fiction mainly, and one of them is the second to last story in this book, and I talked about it during Shorty September. It's called There Will Come Soft Rains. That story really caught my attention and led me to buy this book. And there's just, I think I'm going to bring this back out once it's gotten further into March and the actual Discord discussion is kind of going. So I don't want to sit there and talk all about it right before we're going to talk all about it. But I was impressed. The prose, some of the descriptions are beautifully written. The plots were exciting and unexpected. There's one major thing that I had a problem with throughout this book that I'm going to save for later discussion. But overall, I was really, there was a lot more to it than what I thought it was going to be. Stay tuned for more discussion. Also, before I went on the trip, I just barely began Louise Kennedy's The End of the World is a Cul-de-sac, and this is my Irish selection. I only read 2 stories, so I didn't get very far. I'm going to come back to this now that I'm finished with the Martian Chronicles and start reading this again today. But I really loved Trespasses this year, so I'm interested to see how her work is as a short story writer. I need to look in here and see if these are books that are previously published in different places and now brought together, or if she wrote them for this collection. I'm not sure. So I think I'm going to investigate that, and then I'm going to get back into these again. But I don't have any remarks yet because I barely began and then I set it aside. Also, I have a DNF or a maybe later, but I'm really disappointed that I couldn't get into Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. I love Octavia Butler. I love all the books I've read of hers. But this one I was really struggling with. And I got up to page 98 before I decided I just need to set this aside, at least for now. It's fantasy, and I kind of have a bias where I'm really hard to please with fantasy. And it just felt a little corny. There was something, okay, let me back it up. So there are 2 main characters, and they are quite intriguing. There's a woman named, I think she's Onwanyu, and she has been alive. They've both been alive for hundreds of years, but they stay alive through different means. She just stays alive. She's stalled out in aging around age 20, but she can shapeshift. She can present herself as any age, gender, human, animal. She can change her shape as the situation dictates. She will present herself in forms that she thinks whoever she's with will best accept and will cause the least amount of friction or danger. And she is a healer. She can heal herself. She can heal others. She has a lot of skills, and she has really immense strength. She doesn't flaunt any of these skills. She keeps a lot of things on the lowdown, and that's how she manages to survive through hundreds of years and live in different societies and not attract the attention of others and use her powers productively. Doro is different. Doro has also lived for hundreds of years, but he has done this by hopping from body to body. He will kill somebody and take over their body. He too is opportunistic in choosing what fits the situation the best, but his goals in life are different. He's got like a big wide scale eugenics project going where he's trying to collect other people in unusual gene pools that seem to have some kind of powers or talents or skills. And so he's super excited when he encounters Onwanyu, and he wants her for himself for his partner, but he also wants to see what kind of super race he can create using her. So I know all this sounds pretty good, but it's something about the way it's presented that was disappointing to me, because I don't know, I had high expectations from Octavia Butler, but there's something very stilted and very stereotypical in the presentations, very obvious themes and ideas that are presented that are just, I mean, they're not, it's like the things that would come to mind from the plot or the conversation, but no, somebody has to stop and think, this is the big idea. You know, I don't know. I just couldn't get it. Every time I started to get into it, then it got really, really stiff and stodgy again for a while. And then there'd be this really beautiful passage. So I just got impatient. This is what happens when I know I need to put a book down, is when I'm reading it and I'm not excited to come back to it. I'm thinking, I gotta try a little more. And my eyes are wandering around to the other books in the vicinity that I would like to read instead. So sorry, Octavia, this is not working for me. If you have read this and you have any words of encouragement, like should I keep going, or am I missing the point or something, let me know, because I'm sad that it's not working for me. Usually if I DNF, it's like whatever, but this one, I don't know. I wanted to love it and I'm not loving it. Okay, last but not least, I am reading this weekend August Blue by Deborah Levy. I'm reading it for BookTube prize judging, so I cannot discuss it. It is about a concert pianist who is starting to have performance problems and has walked out of a major performance right in the middle because she just, I don't know, it's kind of like the twisties in gymnastics, it sounds like. I can't really talk any more about it right now, but I will be filming a vlog piece that you'll get to see later on after the voting time is over. All right, that's it. After I finish, so I'm going to be reading the Louise Kennedy and the Deborah Levy this weekend, and whenever I finish one of those, I'll pick up something else from my March TBR that I talked about the other day. And yeah, that's what's going on. Let me know what you've been reading or watching or what you're excited about for March. It is March 1st, so happy March. I hope we're about to head into an excellent springtime of reading and life in general. So have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.